you need to get your brain used to what the language actually sounds like the phonemes, the syllables. You need to get, once you've done that, then get used to the vocabulary. Like as an Anglophone, white Anglophone, I didn't really have much experience with other languages. So like my only experience was really basic Japanese in primary school and some really basic French in high school. I can't remember any of it. But right now I'm sitting at around 1,300 words in Chinese, and I've been reading graded readers probably an hour, 2 hours every day now, ever since maybe May, yeah, May this year. Um, and the thing with reading graded readers and listening to it is you can turn this into a habit. You can do it wherever you go. You can do it on the way to work, the way back from work. You can do it in your lunch break. You can do it before bed. You can do it when you wake up. You can do it at the park. You know, you can't speak to someone in Chinese wherever you go. I mean, but you can, but only at a very high level, at a native level, because you don't want to walk into your local Asian supermarket, your local Asian restaurant, and then start annoying them with really bad Chinese and just embarrassing yourself and wasting. So what? Who cares? I mean, look, you're just getting attention. That's all you're trying to do. Because like, why? I don't understand. Like, why is everyone focused on speaking? Because what are you going to talk about? Like, what is there to talk about if you don't have any vocabulary in that language? Like, you've got no vocabulary, so you don't know any words. You don't even know how to make sounds in that language, and you're trying to talk. You're wasting the other person's point. You're wasting the other person's time. And that's the thing. Like, if you don't know how to read a novel, you can't read a graphic novel. If you can't even use an app in another language, how do you expect to speak to that person and have interesting, engaging conversations that they're actually excited to have and they can become your friend? Like, what do you? I just don't get it. Because if you go onto these language apps like Tandem, if you go and meet up with someone in person who's native in another language and they try and talk to you, you can't even hear it at a learner's level. Like you can't even use these learning apps and listen to these phrases and these paragraphs and these pages, these learning stories. What are you going to do when you're actually with this person? You can't do anything because you need to be able to reply to what they're saying. And see, since you're learning their language, responsibility is on you to take interest in what they are saying, to take interest in how they think, to take interest in how this language actually operates. And from my experience with the Chinese language, the spatio-temporal relationship it has with the world is very different to, say, English. The way that I think about time, the way that I think about space, the way that I think about relationships between people is incredibly different to the way that Chinese is talking about this sort of stuff. That is the hard part. The hard part is not the tones. The hard part is not the symbols. Okay, like you actually can learn this stuff pretty quickly. But the first time I started struggling was like the when it started referring to like time, like okay, this is afterwards, like that's before, or like that is yesterday. Like the way that they refer to it in conversations can get quite confusing because the way they tell time is quite different to us. It's not Christian time. They don't have the same gods. Like they don't grow up. They don't have the the Greek mythology, the Roman mythology. They don't have Catholicism, Christianity, Judaism. None of this stuff was in China. They had a completely different system of thought, like Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism. Um, they went through all that sort of stuff, as well as a bunch of other stuff. I'm not even going to name right now, right? Their thought process is very different. The way they perceive the world is different. And that's the thing with Anglophones. Anglophones just think, okay, I'm going to learn that word because that word means that in my language, right? So I'm going to learn the word for toilet. I'm going to learn the word for burger. I'm going to learn the word for fries. But see, here's the thing. That's not how language works. At a very basic level, yes, it does. If you're just referring to objects, but if you're trying to connect things in the room and then talk about things in an emotional way and get really into like cultural concepts, no, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that at all because language is a keyhole to reality. And it really pisses me off when people like don't see this and they think that like it's just that it's just like it's like puzzle, it's like a game because it's more than just a game or a puzzle. It's more than just a challenge. It's a different cultural sensibility that you need to get used to. It's a different body language. It's a different type of thinking. It's a different thought process. So if you don't read these stories, you don't listen to their thoughts and opinions before walking up and talking to them, you're just like, what are you doing? You know, you've actually got to you got to take interest in them before you become one of them. Right? You got to listen to them because you're not right now at this point in time when you're trying to learn a language. What I've realized is the most important thing is pay attention to them, and that was the biggest issue that I came across. But it's the reason why I'm pointing this out is even as a beginner, is that this is quite hard to do because other people, right, are taught the communicative method. The communicative method does work, but it works at a much higher level. It doesn't necessarily work at like this low level. It works at a much, much, much higher level because the thing is, most people, very few people, learn a language that isn't English. Okay? And most people learn a language when they're a child. It's because, like, it's because of educational policies, it's because of the way the government functions. So at the end of the day, like, stepping outside of your own language, if you're an English speaker, a person who understands English and grew up with English and lives in an Anglophone country, it is incredibly difficult because everyone's going to go to you and start talking to you in English too. And you're going to become so used to this. And you're going to start thinking that everyone knows English, thinks English. It's so hard to get out of this thought process. But one of the most powerful ways to do this, to get out of this thought process, is get habits. Like start with. I've been starting with the habit of reading. I used to read all the time because I used to work in a library. I love reading. I love stories. I love nonfiction too. I love reading about sociology, historical concepts, and philosophy. And so read this stuff. I read this stuff in another language. I read it in Chinese. Eventually, I want to move into like cartoons, donghua, read graphic novels, manhua. Um, and like, eventually start doing other stuff too, like talking to people in real life. But it's incredibly difficult to get to this point because everyone will tell me, not on top of the lack of input and not paying attention to the people from this nation, the people who grew up the language, the people who grew up this thought process. What they'll tell you, right, in an Anglophone country is you can't do it. It's too hard. Isn't this the hardest language? So there's a lot of challenges you need to face if you're trying to learn a language. And I'm just leading this vlog because I'm just pushing against it every single day. I'm pushing against it because it's definitely harder than learning a musical instrument. Because a musical instrument, like my first video on this channel, that was done after probably about 9 months or yeah, okay, maybe a year. It took probably a year to get to that level. I think it was Acceptance by Kira Yamaoka from that track was from Shattered Memories. I've been playing the piano for over 2 years now. But look, I mean, I've been getting input since like stories, narratives since about May. But I've been trying to learn Chinese ever since the end of last year. And yeah, it's taking some time, but like I'm going through all these levels. Like I used to not be able to detect the different sounds. Like I used to be able to not pass the different characters and put them together and see the words. But I'm seeing where it's all connecting. And slowly things are starting to fit together for me. So it is an amazing journey. And I'm interested to see where it's going to take me.